Hello there and welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett without Kent Myers this week. Kent will be back next week. But in today's show, we're going to catch up with Jim Priest. Jim has been on the show before, but he is the new CEO of Sunbeam Family Services, a 107-year-old tradition here in the Oklahoma City area. So we'll catch up with Jim and get to it right after this break. You're watching The Verdict.
One of the reasons why I moved to Rockaway is because it's such a diverse culture and different ethnicities. And my camera has opened some doors to really meet people that I probably wouldn't have gotten to meet without it. I'm Beth Perkins, I'm a professional photographer, and I'm Chickasaw. It came in as like a mini tidal wave. Everything sustainable had just disappeared in one swoop, and I just underestimated this power, and I realized really how little we are in this whole scheme of things and how quickly things can go bad. My community is still rebuilding, and for them to just show up out of the blue and just start clearing out my house was, I'm not one that likes to ask for help. So for someone to come and do that for me was really touching and humbling. I've thought about the history of the Chickasaws and what they went through as far as relocating and losing their homes and having to rebuild and to thrive in the end after all of that is just a true testament to the Chickasaw strength. And I try and draw from that and remember that that's a part of who I am.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofenation.com.
People have been talking about energy independence for a long time. It's always been popular, but today it's possible.
We have an enormous supply of oil and gas in the United States, much more than we thought just a few years ago.
New technology, massive new discoveries, largely made by Oklahoma companies. It literally changes everything.
And Oklahoma is leading the charge. Go watch this video to see why. Energy independence starts with us.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett minus Kent Myers this week, but we have a guest that will fill that void admirably. It's Jim Priest. Jim's been on the show before, political candidate, attorney, 34 years practicing law, and he's an adjunct professor at the OCU School of Law and Southern Nazarene University. Welcome back to The Verdict.
Thanks, Mick. Great to be here.
And Jim has a new job that we're going to get to in a moment. He is now the CEO of Sunbeam Family Services, a very high-profile nonprofit in the Oklahoma City area. But we're going to start way back when. I'd like to just know more about Jim Priest. You grew up where?
Grew up in upstate New York, a town called Syracuse, and my dad was a blue-collar worker. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I had a great family life. Really couldn't ask for anything more. Loving parents, good structure to my home. And that's one of the things that really shaped my thinking and my outlook on the world. I wish for everyone to have the kind of upbringing that I had with engaged adults who care about you and help shape your future.
And your education?
I, of course, went to school in growing up years in Syracuse, and then I went to college at a small Christian college in western New York called Houghton. Then I went to Syracuse Law School back at the hometown. And then I married a Texas girl, and she convinced me that Oklahoma was halfway between Texas and New York, and I didn't do the math, and we were here a couple of years before I figured out, I don't think it's quite halfway. But it's worked out great, and so we've lived here in Oklahoma for 34 years.
And what type of law did you practice primarily?
I did all kinds of different trial work, but I did mostly civil rights and human resource labor law. And that was a really interesting area. You deal with so many different kinds of people and so many different kinds of problems. It really was helpful to me to understand people practicing that kind of law.
Your name has been prevalent in media for several years, and I think a lot of people might remember the ethics column that you wrote. Talk a little bit about the background of that and why you were drawn to that specific part of the industry.
Well, it's interesting. At that time, the editor of the Journal Record was a guy named John Kamenecki, and John heard me give a speech on ethics for Leadership Oklahoma. And he came up, he said, "I'm thinking about doing this thing on ethics in the paper. Would you be willing to write a column once a month, and then we'll have 3 other people and we'll alternate, and I'd like to address ethics in the Journal Record." And I said, "Yeah, I think I could do that." And I was writing another column, another weekly column at that time for the Oklahoman on family. And so a couple weeks later, John called me back and he said, "Hey Jim, could you write that column every week instead of once a month?" And I said, "Well, John, what happened to the other 3 people you were going to ask?" And he said, "Well, I talked to them about it, and they felt like, maybe they would be judged by a stricter standard in their conduct if they wrote about it, and they didn't want to do that." And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And not to suggest by any means that I'm perfect. I struggle in all areas of my life like all of us do, but I felt how important it was to speak out on that issue. And so I wrote that for several years and really enjoyed it, and it led to opportunities to speak to the public as well on that very important topic.
Now, have you given up the law profession here for this job, or you're doing both?
I am winding down my practice. I've just got a few cases that I need to transition, and when I was hired, the board was understanding that after 34 years, it's going to take a little time for me to exit. But I've substantially left the law as of today, and I just have a couple of more cases to wind down.
I think most people are at least generally aware of Sunbeam Family Services, but if not, we have a kind of a pictorial here, and I'll ask you to kind of talk us through these pictures. If we can go to the pictures that Jim was kind enough to bring in today. And I think what we'll see, in the first picture that actually illustrates Sunbeam's services is that you guys have a new facility coming.
Right, we're very excited about this. We've been at our present facility for nearly 100 years on Northwest 21st Street. But this building that you see depicted here will be at 14th and Classen. And it's going to give us some great opportunities to expand our core of services and provide a great learning environment, both for our employees as well as for the community that uses our facility for training and collaboration.
And it's under construction now. When is it going to open?
We hope by mid-December we'll be in.
Okay, and this show is airing in December as well, so about that time. And some of the other pictures, if we can just go ahead and roll through them all, we'll give you a chance to talk about it.
You bet. Well, one of the great services that we provide services for all ages at all stages. And this picture depicts a couple of our senior citizens. We provide senior care in a variety of different ways. And I think what's important about this is our baby boomer generation is aging. This is going to become an increasing need for these kinds of services. So we do a variety of different things. We provide training and support for grandparents raising grandchildren. We have a shelter for seniors who are dispossessed of their home or find themselves homeless. Maybe they're victims of elder abuse, or maybe they've just hit hard times financially. And we also have a program that's a terrific volunteer program called Senior Companions, where people can remain in their home. They need just a little bit of help, and some senior volunteers will come in and do some things around the house, befriend them, read to them, help them with some chores. And it's a great win-win because the senior gets to stay at home with a little help.
Right.
And another senior who's able to render the help has this great volunteer opportunity that really speaks to their heart. And
they may get more out of it than the person they're helping.
That's how it works.
Let's take a look at the next picture.
This is representative of the other end of our age spectrum of services, and that's our early childhood education. We do a program here in Oklahoma City called EduCare, and it's a phenomenal program that really has different facilities nationwide. And we have one of them here in Oklahoma City, another one in Tulsa. And what we're trying to do is work with children of the poor and working poor to get them a launch, an early launch, so that when they get to school, they're not constantly trying to catch up with those that have been better advantaged.
It's kind of a pre-K on steroids.
It is exactly. That's a good way of looking at it.
Incredible, almost one-on-one attention in some of these areas.
Right.
One-on-one's a slight exaggeration, but not far off.
All right. We have very intensive adult-to-child ratios, and what it does, Mick, when I started reading this stuff, I thought everybody ought to be interested in investing in this because it has such a great exponential impact into the future. And people that have won the Nobel Prize for Economics have studied this and found that there's a $17 to $1 return on investment. So for every dollar we put in educare, we end up as a community getting back $17 worth of benefit because these kids will complete school, they'll become contributing members of our community, they'll get a good paying job, their lives will be more stable, and we can really get upstream from the problems we're trying to address with early childhood education.
Yeah, I know some of the early results are so promising. And I agree. I mean, this is an area that Oklahoma as a state has kind of become a leader in, and educare is going into those lowest performing zip codes and really providing attention to a group of kids that almost certainly would not have got it otherwise.
Right.
Let's take a look at the next picture. What's this?
This is a picture of, it's actually the very first picture of our agency. It's the first Sunbeam Family Home, and we started as an orphanage back in 1907. A lady who is depicted there in the picture by the name of Lizzie Swisher felt a burden for the orphans of Oklahoma City, which hadn't been going for that long, but already had a growing orphanage problem, or orphan problem. And so Ms. Swisher and a few of her friends got together and said, let's do something about this. They took the initiative. They went door to door with a basket collecting donations so that they could support these orphans. And of course, the program has evolved and changed over the years. But what Ms. Swisher said back then is still true today.
What's that?
None of us can do everything, but all of us can do something. And she and her friends took it upon themselves back in a day when women weren't that much in the public arena. But she took the initiative to go out and do something about a pressing social problem.
Yeah.
And the result is today, 107 years later, Sunbeam is still going strong.
Well, how involved was government in the orphanages? Were they involved at all?
They really weren't initially involved. Over the years, government has become more involved, but as I said, it was mostly Ms. Swisher and her cadre of women going out literally with baskets or writing letters asking people for just $1.
Yeah.
If you could just spare $1.
All right, let's take a break. Jim Priest is our guest. He is the new CEO of Sunbeam Family Services. More with Jim when we get back.
When you have something important to communicate, it becomes clear that there's a lot of competition for your audience's attention. So how can your message stand out and actually resonate with your audience? Legal Graphics has the answers. The team at Legal Graphics will work with you to plan, design, and even test your presentation to ensure your message will be heard and remembered. Call Legal Graphics today to schedule an appointment. The readiness is all.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett minus Kent Myers. Kent will be back with us next week. But our guest is Jim Priest. He is the new CEO of Sunbeam Family Services. And I think one of the messages we want to illustrate this week is just how many different services your organization offers. And we've talked a little bit about the youngest, but you brought some props here. You were joking that as a trial lawyer, you always come with things to hold up. But this is a children's book. What does this symbolize?
Right. One of the things that I think Sunbeam is well known, but it's what we do is not as well known. So I'm trying to find new ways to communicate that, and I always think graphic things or objects help illustrate that better. So this is early childhood education. We've talked a little bit about that, the important dynamic. It's more than just literacy. We're also teaching them social skills, how to cope with anger and things like that. And so that's the young age spectrum. We begin early, and of course we go late. We talked about the senior services, and the house kind of illustrates that. We provide housing for seniors who are without a house temporarily. We help people stay in their homes, and we send people into their homes, people that volunteer.
And the red heart here, what does this illustrate?
Yeah, now that's something, Mayor, you may want to keep for yourself because it's a stress ball. And I'm sure you have a lot of stress in your life.
Yeah, a little bit.
But that also is in the shape of a heart, and it represents our counseling.
Oh, okay.
We do counseling across the age spectrum, and we help people cope with stress and cope with heart problems and cope with discouragement.
What type, get more specific about the counseling, because I really do think people ought to take more opportunities to visit with counselors who, people think when they're going through a tough time that they're like the only person that's ever dealt with this situation, that there can't be possibly any cookie cutter situation to whatever is weighing on me at the personal time.
Right.
But it couldn't be more wrong. I mean, that there are trained professionals out there, and it doesn't have to cost $250 an hour. Sunbeam is offering these services. So talk about the counseling and what types of people might be helped.
Right. Well, one of the great things about Sunbeam, we offer services to people who aren't able to pay the freight associated with normal counseling. So we provide services in the counseling arena on a sliding scale basis. We don't turn anybody down. And one of the great illustrations of that is the victims of the May tornado and more. Lots of issues dealing with the trauma associated with that event, and Sunbeam was very involved in providing counseling to adolescents, kids, adults who dealt with that great trauma in their lives.
What about marital issues or domestic violence issues?
Right, all of those, and we have counselors in all of those issues, including addiction issues. And so if someone has a problem, one of the things that people think about counseling often is there's a stigma attached to it. Oh, that's only for crazy people. We can't, I'm not going to go to a counselor because that'll be admitting that I'm not well mentally. And probably most people don't know this, but a lot of people have gone to counselors. They may not advertise it, but they've been helped by counselors. I've gone to counseling. My wife and I have gone to counseling, and it's improved both our individual lives and our marriage. So we want to encourage people, don't let that stigma keep you away, whether it's an addiction issue, a marriage issue, a personal issue of trauma. Come see our counselors and we can help.
I have found that I'm more willing to talk to a counselor than I might be on a general basis. It's for some reason it brings out an opportunity to discuss an issue that I've been reluctant to talk about or just haven't been inspired to talk about with anybody else.
Right.
And it really can be helpful. And so I'm glad you're helping to address that stigma. And then the teddy bear, is this back into the kids, or is this more of a different
it is. It deals with our foster care program, and we help in foster care, which of course has been in the news a great deal lately. When we place a child in a home, we give them a bear. And we walk through with them, what's your bear's name going to be, and try to get them to talk about moving into a new place with something that they can take with them that is of comfort to them. And so we've got a growing foster care issue in the state of Oklahoma and in our local community. Sunbeam reaches out. A lot of our programs are mobile, and so we're not just Oklahoma City. We go out to Guthrie and Enid and Chickasha. And so even if you're not in the greater Oklahoma City area, reach out to us. Our website is sunbeamfamilyservices.org. You can get on there, and of course, if you need help, you can get help. If you want to help, you can help. either by donating your time or investing your money in our agency.
Well, talk about the foster care program, because I noticed kind of a change in the culture of the community about a year or two ago. It seemed that we were using foster people who were willing to help kids. Yeah, great calling. But then there seemed to be more of a proactive effort. In other words, the people involved in this process said, let's go out and encourage people to be foster parents.
Right.
Don't find people that are willing to do it. Let's talk to people about how important a role this might be for them in society if they feel called. Have you noticed that proactive effort to go out and increase the number of people who might be willing to serve as a foster parent?
Absolutely, and it's partly a response to the growing need, but it's also, there's always a gap between the needs of the community and the provisions that are available. And so somebody has to fill that gap. And that's what we say, if you're interested in Sunbeam, you can help step into that gap and invest in the future of young lives or older lives. And one of the ways we do that is going out actively recruiting foster parents. It might be, we might do it in a church setting or a civic group setting, and we hope we will reach someone who thinks to themselves, you know, I think I could do that. Maybe I'll go home and I'll talk to my partner or my spouse about that, and maybe we could do something to step in the gap and make at least a little bit better for one child or two children. Mm-hmm. And I keep thinking about Ms. Swisher's statement, we can't do everything, but all of us can do something. And so we want to motivate people to think, I could bring a foster child into my home.
Well, you're right, because people in Oklahoma, and really people around the world, but people in Oklahoma seem specifically inclined to help people. Right. But it takes an organization or a person to kind of set up the infrastructure where people can get involved and help. And I think Mrs. Swisher's words are very true here. What, over 100 years later? I think she must have been a very astute woman.
Right.
Talk again about the new facility that you're opening up on Classen. If people are driving down Classen, they've probably seen it, maybe wondered what it was. I know there's a sign out there, but might have wondered if they didn't have a chance to read all about it. But what will this facility allow you to do that you really haven't been able to do as well in the previous location?
Right. Well, our current location on 21st Street, we're kind of in several different spots. And what this facility will allow us to do is to bring virtually everybody, except for our early childhood folks, bring everybody under one roof. And so our senior shelter will be there right adjacent to our office complex. We'll have the foster care folks will be right there, the counseling people will be there, of course the administration, human resources and all of that. We'll have everybody right there in one area, and we'll be able to collaborate better. Because one of the things that we have to be careful of, we have these four distinctive programs, but they intersect in so many ways, and we don't want them to operate in silos. We want people in counseling, for example, to be available to seniors in our senior companion program. And same thing in early education. We want the counseling to be able to be available to them, and maybe they also need foster care services. So one can help collaborate with the other. And we also want to be a site of collaboration for other nonprofits. We've built it with lots of conference rooms and meeting space so that other nonprofits can come in and collaborate with us, but also build their own infrastructure.
And we're going to have to make that the final word. Jim, thanks so much for coming on The Verdict.
All right, thank you.
Jim Priest is the new CEO of Sunbeam Services, a 107-year-old nonprofit that's doing great work in Oklahoma. I'll be back with the final word after this.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I really think people are so unaware of the number of kids waiting just in Oklahoma. And I think if more people knew that those children were out there waiting, I think that just by the way we live our lives and the people we talk to, that maybe we can help encourage adoption from Oklahoma.
You will always be Mom and Dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett without Kent Myers this week, but Kent will be back next week. And I want to just thank Jim Priest and the board out at the Sunbeam Family Services for all the work that they're doing in helping people in the state of Oklahoma that are in need, and the wide breadth of services that are offered, you know, from pre-K all the way to elderly services, is really filling a niche, you know, that would in many cases go unfilled if not for them. And I thought it was so pertinent that he brought back the words of Lizzie Swisher, the woman that really started the organization over 100 years ago. And her comment I thought worth re-quoting here at the end of the show. None of us can do everything, but all of us can do something. And I think what that reflects is that we all see social needs in our particular community, and we all know that it's a little overwhelming when you take it in its entirety. But as Lizzie said, all of us can do something, and Sunbeam offers great opportunities for Oklahomans who would like to get more involved with helping people who might need help on a temporary basis or on a permanent basis. And I want to also give you the website for Sunbeam so you can interact with them or perhaps help them with your time or finances. Jim's website is sunbeamfamilyservices.org. That's sunbeamfamilyservices.org. I also want to talk about our website, theverdict.tv. You can go on our website and talk about a guest that you'd like to see on an upcoming edition or a topic that you'd like to see Kent and I discuss. That's going to do it for now, though. I want to again thank Jim Priest with Sunbeam Family Services for coming on the show. And we're getting close to New Year's. I hope 2014 turned out the way you hoped it would, and I hope 2015 is even better. That's going to do it for this week's show. For an absent Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.